They have just restarted the recording. I apologize to you, those of you who are going to watch the recording. You missed my opening story, but we're working on the very first question in Secret 1, and that's why is mentoring important to you, and how has mentoring impacted you? So I see several people typing some responses. All right, thanks, Rich. Rich says I wouldn't have made it to software engineering without the people who helped me when I was banging my head against the wall. That's right, and mentoring is important to encourage and support diversity in our industry. Absolutely, that's the way we get it done. Reinhardt came from a non-traditional background. Irene can see that it's a powerful opportunity and ready to do it. Awesome, Irene. I hope that we can give you some tools today to do that. My imposter syndrome would have consumed me if not for mentors sharing their experience. Imposter syndrome is so real, and you're absolutely right. A thing a mentor can do is to help you really understand your accomplishments, keep a record of them, and really help combat that. Awesome. So I will do the big reveal now. Secret number 1. Successful mentors. See how my editor does here. Successful mentors mentor because they want to. The drive for mentoring really has to come internally. Successful mentors mentor because they want to. So I've seen organizations try to set up mentoring programs, and they assign mentors to new hires, and it can kind of work, but unless you have, and really this is kind of true for anything, honestly, that's worth doing, that it has to come from an intrinsic place of motivation. You got to want to do this. Can't really be assigned. So part of what makes successful mentors so successful is that they want to do this from for their own reasons. And so I encourage you to find that reason for yourself. Like, why is mentoring going to matter to you? Very good. I am, as we go, I'm going to be committing on a branch here, so you can check that out afterwards, or if you're watching the recording, you can see what we did there. All right. Well, Zoom has my buttons running really slowly here. We'll move on then. So a couple of kind of housekeeping things before we get going much further. It's a 90-minute workshop. We're going to go straight through, and most responses will be in the chat. I may ask a few people to speak if you're willing to. Really asking you to, if you're here today, to really engage, to be present, so to not be multitasking. My commitment to you is to really try to engage you and present you with information. Again, I would love to have video on if you're willing to do it. That helps me see who we're talking to and how stuff is responding. Again, looking for you to write responses in your workbook, and then add them to the chat. All right. So thank you all for sharing there on Secret 1. Let's go on to number 2. Number 2, successful mentors don't teach, they mentor. So I want to set up for you a kind of straw man difference here between teaching and mentoring. I'm going to close a few things here as I'm getting a little bogged down. So successful mentors don't teach. So I'm going to set this up for you, contrasting kind of three things that I think are kind of in your typical teaching classroom environment. Now, it's a little bit of a straw man. I apologize to any of you who are educators, but I am going to actually going to turn off the ability to unmute yourself right now, just so we can keep focus here, and I'll unmute people as we go. All right. So the first is behavior. So teachers primarily focus on getting the right behavior out of students. When we're mentoring, we're not just interested in behavior, but in the underlying character that we will develop. So mentoring focuses not just on behaviors, but on character, who the person is, that underlying value system of who they are. Because the thing about trying to get a certain behavior is it actually sets up a dependency. In fact, so how do you know that the learner will behave in the same way if you're not around? So we're trying to really set up those deep character value traits for somebody that will help them have good behaviors throughout their career. The next difference is that most teaching environments focus on knowledge acquisition. When I say knowledge, I'm talking about declarative knowledge that you can say you know a thing, you can speak it. When we're mentoring, particularly in something like programming, we're focusing not just on knowledge but on skills, not just knowing, but knowing how to be able to do a thing. Sometimes called this functional knowledge, so knowing and being able to do. So the difference, and thanks Travis for that comment, this is a big weight off your shoulders because you can't actually learn anything for somebody you're mentoring, right? It's their responsibility to learn. They have to do their own learning work. You are really just a guide in this process. Okay, a teacher will sort of be successful if they have if their student can regurgitate what they've told them. Often in traditional educational environments, this is spitting information back out on a test. We're actually looking for a deeper level of learning here when we're mentoring. We're looking for the learner to be able to synthesize what we have learned. And when we talk about learning outcomes, we'll get a little bit into like the different levels of learning, but synthesize when you can take two unrelated things and put them together in a different way to come up with a whole new idea. And that's the kind of deep level of learning that we're hoping to come up with when we are mentoring. The end of an educational teaching engagement is some sort of certification. You get a diploma or a degree or a certificate or a certified Scrum Master mug, and that is what says you have learned the thing. When we're mentoring, there's not really a certification. There's nothing. What we're really looking to do is not just to certify, but to transform, so that the person coming out of the other side of the relationship is fundamentally different, operates fundamentally different because they have been transformed by the time they've spent with you as a mentor. And the last is one of kind of scale. So most teaching happens in a group setting, one teacher with a large bunch of students following along. And mentoring really is about a one-on-one relationship. So it can be individualized and personalized in a way that I don't have any mugs for you, Daniel, but I love that. So we're going to be working in a one-on-one relationship. All right, that's secret number 2. All right, secret number 3, successful mentors ask more questions than they answer. So I want you to take a minute and think historically about some of the greatest mentor guru types of people in history. Who are some of the people you think about if you think about a historical mentor? Socrates. Oh, thank you. Like you spoon-fed me. Socrates. What was Socrates' whole thing? The Socratic method built on questions. Built on questions. Absolutely. Socrates is a great example. If you look at some of the most famous spiritual gurus, whether Gandhi or Muhammad or Jesus, you look at how they respond to their teachers, to their students or the disciples. They almost always respond with a question when asked one. So why does this work? Why do successful mentors work this way? It's because you're right. I should not have just given that answer. Good. A question can drive, a good question can drive years of growth. If you answer a question, it's sort of the end of the learning. You've given one answer and the wondering is gone, the drive to learn is kind of satisfied. So when you can respond with another question, you can actually prompt more growth and encourage somebody to go even further in their learning. So I would like to, I'd like to play a little game here. So I'm gonna look for some volunteers. And we're going to play a game of questions. So what's going to happen, I'm going to take two of you and spotlight you, right? And you're going to have a conversation, but the conversation has to only happen in questions. All right, so if you make a statement, you're out. If you repeat something, you're out. So what I'm looking for is some volunteers, and if we'll use the Zoom feature of raise hand, that's sticky and I can see. What I'll do is when I spotlight you, I'll ask you to unmute. I'm going to have two of you at a time spotlighted. I'm going to give you a topic, and you're going to start having a conversation. But if you say a statement or you repeat yourself, or if I just get bored with you, then I'm going to boot you out and have the next person come in. All right. So let's give this a go. I got some good hands raised here. Let me see. All right, we're going to start with Dimitri and Ross. All right, I'm going to ask you guys to unmute. All right, Dimitri and Ross, just a mic check. I got you.
Hello, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, we're going to play at questions. The first question will come from Ross, and here is your topic. Okay, your topic is, should we upgrade to Rails 6 or not? All right, first question goes to you, Ross.
Should we upgrade? What benefits would we get from upgrading?
So I'm supposed to follow this up with another question, right?
Good, that was a question as well, yes.
What are the risks of upgrading?
Would the risks outweigh the benefits for us?
What are the breaking changes?
All right, Ross, you looked up to the sky. I'm gonna bring in Sarah to replace you. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, Sarah, you're up with Dimitri. Okay, new topic. You need to choose a microphone for your conferencing setup. First question, Dimitri.
Oh, sorry. The microphone was the question.
Yeah, the microphone's the question.
Okay. What's our price range?
Should we limit ourselves by the budget?
Hmm. What are the commonly highly rated microphones?
Good, thank you. All right, I'm gonna give, let's see, I've got Russell and Katie. We're gonna give two more a shot here, all right? Thank you all for playing. Here comes Russell and, oh, Katie put her hand down. Okay. Oh, there's Katie again. All right. Add to spotlight. Oh, you have to actually start video, Katie, I think, to be on the spotlight. There we go. Hi. And spotlight. All right. Unmute and unmute. Okay, so the topic on the table here today is whether to build a single page app or to write reactive JavaScript from our Rails app. All right, that's our topic. First question to Katie.
What do you think the benefits would be in each scenario?
What kind
It's
of
hard,
benefits-
isn't it?
Yeah. What kind of benefits would you be most excited to see?
Do you have a preference to one over the other?
Damn.
Damn, is a statement. Nice job. Victory to Katie. Thank you. Thank you all for playing. All right. Thank you for being brave in this environment, for joining us as well. So I have some practice for us in the workbook now. Sorry, Katie, I'm trying to unspotlight you. I have some questions in the workbook here, and so take some practice here now. Say a junior dev or an apprentice came to you wanting, asking you one of these questions. How could you respond back to them with another question? Right. Sorry, Katie, more. I'll give you a chance to do that while I try to figure out the spotlight. Okay. I love that, Matt. Is it okay if you write a test? You're joking, right? So adding right to the end of a statement doesn't really make it a question, but thanks for playing. There's a good one, Irene. I like that. What's your reasoning for not writing a test? It's interesting. Questions can, you can ask a question and not really ask a question, right? And Matt gave us a great example of that. Good, Kyla. What roles or resources does the controller represent? I like it. Okay, my frame rate on the screen share is really bad, it looks like. So I'm going to switch to this plus a screen share. Okay, thank you all for playing on Secret 3. Let's roll on now to number 4. Awesome. I'm going to shut down a couple more things just to try to get some more memory on my computer. So bear with me one more second. Okay, so secret number 4, successful mentors co-learn. The thing about being as a mentor is that you need not be a master to be a mentor. You really only need to learn or to know how to do one more thing than the person that you're mentoring. In fact, experts can make really bad mentors. The problem with being as an expert is that you don't remember what it was like not to know. So learning is proximal, like we only learn something in relationship to something that we already know. So to learn a new concept, you have to kind of mentally build scaffolding from what you know to that new concept. And the thing about expert is that they've torn that scaffolding down, right? They've been living in the completed structure for many years, so they don't have those kind of all those in-between steps. So a lot of times somebody, if you have just learned something, you are in the best possible spot to teach that thing. And so don't let expertise keep you from mentoring. So I signed up a couple years ago to teach a after-school program for girls who code. It was for middle school girls, and they gave me a club. I was at the Chicago Public Library, and had a dozen or so middle school girls, and I was supposed to teach them programming. And the very first lesson that we were to do was explaining what a variable was. And like I couldn't do it. Like a variable is a variable. Like you just use it, you assign stuff to it, it changes, it's a variable. Like I don't have any scaffolding for what it's like not to know what a variable is, or a loop, or any of these basic programming concepts. So thankfully, Girls Who Code gave me this great curriculum, and I just followed the curriculum and was able to to hopefully give something to this group. But it is, it's hard to remember what it was like not to know. And so some of the best mentoring environments are ones where we have what are called near peers, so that you have somebody just ahead of you who is learning something and can help you learn it. And you've got somebody just behind you that you can teach something to. And that's where we had that sort of environment inside of the 8th Light and One World Coders apprenticeships, but it really kind of takes that pipeline to do that. So fill that one out, co-learn. And then this image here on this kind of illustrates what are called zone of proximal development. So if you have this kind of progression of people learning, you'll always have somebody nearby. So if you're starting mentoring, it's good to start mentoring somebody close to you, a near peer, somebody who's trying to do the thing that you just learned how to do. So I want to take a reflection moment here on number 4, and for you to think about a mentor that you've had in your life, and would you have considered them an expert? Like how far away from you were they in their knowledge? So take a second to answer that question. Let me give this another try here. Oops, sorry for the infinity stone. Okay. Give you a chance to see how this has played out for you. So Esther said she's only had experts mentoring you. Has that ever gotten frustrating for you, Esther? I'm gonna let you unmute and talk about that for a second if you're willing.
Thank you. It's been intimidating. It hasn't been frustrating. It's just been intimidating, and it's been annoying to constantly ask, what does this word mean? Oh, what does this word mean? Oh, what does this word mean? So it makes you feel like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But they've always been very good at responding.
Good.
It's just, I feel weird asking for every single definition.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, that experts develop this sort of vocabulary that is hard to penetrate even, right? So you have to learn all the words before you can even understand the concept. So that's a great example of how that plays out. Great, thank you, Esther. Okay, secret number 5. Successful mentors follow the learner. So let me explain a little bit what I mean by that. Follow the learner. So as a mentor, again, we mentioned you're not a teacher. What you are more than anything is a scientific observer. So the place I really found this language was when I went to find a preschool for my daughters. So I'm gonna switch back. Video's lagging again. So it just happened the first place we walked into was a Montessori school. And so started learning about Montessori and the Montessori method, and they're the ones who gave me this language. So traditional schools have a follow the teacher model, where a teacher stands up in front of the class and the whole class does the same thing at the same time at the same pace, following along with the teacher's instruction. A Montessori classroom flips that around completely. So in a Montessori classroom, you have all these materials, all these works spread out throughout the room. And the kids choose the work that they want to do. And the teacher will introduce a work to a kid, but then watch them do it, watch them use it. And when the kid has mastered a particular work, they'll introduce the next work to them or the next iteration of that work, so that everyone progresses in the classroom at their own pace. And I walked into this classroom and I saw it in action, and like I got so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is apprenticeship for toddlers. I must have this for my children. So it's become really the number one priority in our family in terms of finances. And in fact, we're about to move again just to get closer to this Montessori school that we love so much, because it just believe in that follow the learner approach to learning. And so you as a mentor are in a similar situation. Your job more than anything is to follow the learner and how they're doing, to watch them, watch their mastery, and present for them exactly the next right challenge at the right time. So I want to explore this concept through the concept of flow. So the guy to really do a lot of the research on flow, his name is an Austrian, Michael Csikszentmihalyi, and his research focused on this one question: what makes you happy? I want to start with a version of that question for you, and I want to make it specific to work. Like, what does a really good day at work look like for you? So again, respond in your workbook, and then if you're willing, share some responses in the Discord chat. What does a really good day at work look like for you? All right, let's see. We got getting to work on the actual code. Yeah, instead of answering questions all day. When I've helped my peers, discovering something new, getting consensus, least amount of commits, all test passing, feeling really productive and unblocked. It's that not being stuck. Yeah, good. Feeling like I've actually solved a problem. Awesome. Thank you for those responses. So what Csikszentmihalyi found in his research, he grouped the kind of responses to this into what he called flow. And here's how he described it. He described it as being focused, like being completely involved in what you're doing. He even used the word ecstasy, which is a sense of being outside of the everyday reality, having clarity, having confidence, having serenity, no worries about yourself. And then this timelessness factor where hours seem to pass by in minutes, right? Like you just lose all sense of time. And the final thing he identified was this intrinsic motivation that the work itself becomes the reward, doing good work for its own sake. And that's what how Csikszentmihalyi defined this idea of flow. So I'm going to look at learning inside of flow and what helps or hurts us. And so I've kind of adapted Csikszentmihalyi's model here. You'll see the image on secret number 5. And Csikszentmihalyi lays this out in talking about the task that somebody is working on an axis of challenge versus skill. So on the y-axis, we have challenge. The higher the axis, higher the challenge. Skill, higher the skill to the right. Okay, so when the challenge is perfectly matched with somebody's skill, that really creates the conditions for this flow state of being really happy with your work, really engaged, really involved. But look what happens as the challenge gets too high for a particular person's skill set. Eventually, they end up in this, what Csikszentmihalyi calls it as anxiety, in the spot where you just can't get anything done, really worried about the work because you don't have the underlying skills needed to complete the work. When you're over-skilled for a particular task, you slide into relaxation, which is, not a bad state, and then eventually to boredom, where, right, you're just doing a rote task that you're, overly skilled for. And in between anxiety and flow is what Csikszentmihalyi calls arousal. So it's this kind of being right on the edge of what you know. And this arousal state is where the most intense learning happens. Again, if you think about proximal learning, just being right on the edge of your skill set, being pushed just to the next level. And this is kind of what it means for you to be a guide as a mentor, is finding the challenge that sits right in that pocket, that is just a little bit harder than what the learner currently is able to do. And what that kind of gives us is this back and forth, and that you'll see in the second chart here. As somebody acquires skill, the same task will become less hard for them. They'll eventually slide into relaxation. When you see that relaxation, it's time to present a new challenge to the apprentice. So what we do is we kind of learn in arousal, like we learn something new, but then for that really to, that learning to really set in, you want lots of practice. So we practice in the flow state. That's your goal as a mentor, is to find the right challenge that pushes learning into arousal, and then is followed by practicing in the flow state. And it's all about observing the apprentice, observing the learner. If you find somebody you're mentoring really anxious about their work, step back and ask what skills are missing. Because I'll give you an example from the 8th Light Apprenticeship. One of the things we had people do there was to build a web server from kind of bare sockets, just to really deeply learn the deeply learn HTTP and how it works. But we noticed a lot of people getting really anxious when they got this assignment. If you think about it, we often gave them a new language to do this in. They had to learn about sockets, they had to learn string parsing, and had to be able to read the RFC for HTTP. So throwing all these things at them at once, none of the skills that they had created anxiety. So what we did was to break it down a little bit. We did first a chat server that just uses sockets to learn how to use sockets. And then we did just a string parsing exercise and just a language exercise. And then when those base skills are built up, then they can attack that whole problem that brings them together. So it's all about finding that right sized challenge for the moment. All right, and thank you, John, for posting that link about Kotlr. I posted a link here too to Csikszentmihalyi High's TED Talk. It's a great introduction to Flow. If you're interested, you'll see how I've adapted his picture a little bit. He has a full circle of engagement based on these, so it's some good going deeper if you're interested in that as well. But for now, let's move on to number 6. So before I reveal this one, I want you, this is having to do with feedback, how we actually give feedback to apprentices. So I want you to take a minute and think about some feedback that you've recently received. And in your workbook, describe that feedback in as much detail as you can remember. So maybe it came, on a pull request, or maybe it came from a colleague. And when you've done that, I want you to answer these 3 questions about that feedback. Was it clear or opaque? Was it immediate or delayed? And how did the feedback make you feel? And if in the chat, you can just post your answers, a 3-word answer to that. So maybe it was clear, immediate, and angry. So think about the feedback and then post those 3 words in the chat. All right, Daniel had some opaque, delayed, and confused. Oh, we have 2 of those. Awesome. All right, Daniel and Fenario, I'd love to hear about these. Let me pull you up here. Oh, I don't have name matches there. Daniel, are you there? Could you tell us a little bit about the opaque, delayed, and confused?
Yeah, it was. I had I had put together some descriptions of some things that I had been working on as part of a promotion packet, and my manager first told me, oh yeah, you should probably do this and this and this. And then a couple of days later, he said, actually, this is fine. We should, this looks okay. And then there was, I got the sense that there was I got the sense that there just wasn't a lot of thought being put into it.
You got both like confusing, this is good, this is not good, kind of feedback, and it just left you confused. Good. And the further you get away from it, the more confusing I think it can get. Let me ask Charles. Charles, you said clear, immediate, and useful. Tell us about that feedback.
Yeah, so my manager, I was putting together like some topics for potential roadmap items for my team, and the feedback she gave me was like, essentially right after she read it, she's like, hey, this is what you should do. and we should make it more applicable to like the end user. Like, what would the end user see? What's the business value of it? And so being able to take that back and add that information right into it while I was thinking about it was really useful.
So yeah, it came right at the right moment for you, right when you're thinking about it. Good, good, thank you. So there is a there's a thing that happens when we give critical feedback, what can happen is that the brain can really just shut down on the feedback. Sorry, quick check. You guys seeing me now? Okay, good. So giving critical feedback often can actually hurt more than it helps. When you tell somebody just what they're doing wrong, it activates the amygdala in the brain. The amygdala is like the old part of the brain, the survival, what's responsible for your fight, flight, freeze response. If you think about maybe the last critical performance review you got, how did you feel coming out of that? Did you feel enlightened and helpful? Like, you probably were pretty scared by it and probably didn't hear much of what happens. I know I certainly had performance reviews like that in my career. When that amygdala, when that fight, flight, freeze response takes over, it narrows your focus. It really puts all your energy just to surviving that experience, not to actually hearing the feedback or engaging with it and making any sort of changes. So that takes me to secret number 3. No, what are we on? 6. Secret number 6. I am going to share again here. Desktop. All right, secret number 6. Successful mentors replay their reactions. So the thing about feedback, like, what is it that causes critical feedback to activate those defense mechanisms? And a lot of it is because of the way we present what we have to say. So let me give you this one: replay their reactions. So when we give somebody feedback, we usually state it as a kind of absolute judgment, as the truth. We have some perception of a situation or some feedback, and we present our feedback as the truth. We present our truth as the truth, instead of presenting it as our own opinion. And most feedback that is given really is more about the person giving the feedback than the person receiving the feedback. For me, parenting example for you. So one of the things that just like makes me go bonkers is when my kids grab my glasses. If you're a parent with glasses, you've probably gone through this, but and my youngest daughter is right at that stage where if it's shiny, she loves to grab it. And like, I used to just freak out. Like, I would, gently place the kid down, get her away from me, right? I would get so angry about glasses. Now, why is that? Okay, kids need to learn not to grab glasses. They'll stop eventually, right? Like, it's not some big life lesson that they need to learn. But for me, I've worn glasses since I was 2 years old, and there's nothing worse for a kid than coming home, particularly in the 80s, with your big plastic frames broken. You got to put duct tape around them and wait for an appointment to get some new glasses. Like, it's real traumatic to wear glasses as a kid. And so, like, that part of my response to her, like, it really is a fight response, in response to like my having glasses my whole life and breaking them and coming home with them multiple times broken, right? Now, if I understand that, I can catch that response and choose a different one. And so that's just to illustrate, like, it's so what can we do? Like, how do we actually give feedback? And that's to replay our reactions. So presenting our truth as our truth. Using it really comes down to the language that we use. So here is a great place to start. And that's just with the phrase, this is how that came across for me. Here's what I saw. Here's what I perceive. I don't know how many of you may have grown up. I certainly grew up with the saying in my family that was, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. I kind of want to rewrite that mantra for us here today and to say, if you can't say anything nice, say something about yourself. We want to give people the feedback, but the best way to deliver it is to make it not about them, but to present it as being about me. Now, this is hard. It takes a little bit more vulnerability and courage to do this. But what happens is when you use language like that, replaying your reactions, it becomes the start of a conversation instead of the end of it. When you issue a judgment, it's the end of the conversation. Like, this code is bad, right? Like, it's just, you're just done, right? You've issued a judgment and you're done. So I want to try some exercises here to rewrite some common feedback, replaying our reactions. So that's what this table is here in the workbook. I am still sharing the screen, right? Yep. Okay, so I want to look at this first one and then come up with some alternatives to these phrases in giving feedback, okay? So let's start with, can I give you some feedback? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with asking that question? Can I give you some feedback? So it causes fear. Thanks, Sean. You're right. Like, is that even a question too? Can you say no to that question? Not really, right? It's just does nothing but activates the amygdala, fight or flight. Like, okay, bring it on, right? I love that too. It implies that they might not be okay receiving feedback, right? Like, that's almost patronizing in that way. Can we talk? Is kind of similar, I think. It can set up the same, like, oh God, what's coming, right? It creates fear, it activates that amygdala. Can I give you my take? That's getting there. It's getting better question. I have feedback whether or not you want to hear it. I'm about to say it. So my favorite way to start here is just with, here's my reaction, right? Here's my reaction. And because you're saying it from your own perspective, it does not become an absolute truth, right? You may not have perceived everything in the situation or in the code or understood everything that was in the person's head. You cannot. But by starting with here's my reaction, what you do is it give the person you're giving feedback to a chance to enter into a conversation and to clarify any misconceptions or misassumptions that you have, and it starts a conversation that can carry on. I love that question. Okay, tell me more about this. Just responding with curiosity. Now, I want to warn you about the question why too. Why did you write this way? Like, it can be a good curiosity question, but can also be a judgment, particularly if it's like in an asynchronous pull request review. Like, why did you do this, you idiot? Right? Like, it's pretty easy to hear a judgment when you ask the question why. And it's also you kind of holding back again. So start with your own reaction, your own emotion. I'm scared by this change, or I worry that it's going to cause something like. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. Good job. Good job. What's wrong with good job? It's certainly non-specific. Yeah, too vague. Not helpful enough. So there's another problem with good. No takeaways. Travis, thank you, nailed it. It's an approval, like someone should be seeking your approval instead of their own. So good job is still a judgment. And you're saying, I am the arbitrator of good. And if I say it's good, then it's good, right? Which, while being, still feels good to receive, a good job comment, it does set up kind of a power dynamic, which is not going to create a conversation. It's still a judgment. Even if it's a good judgment, it's a judgment. So instead of saying good job, say something like, that really worked for me, or I liked that. I liked what you did here. What were you thinking when you did them? Like, I like what you did. What was going through your mind? So asking someone to explain themselves without letting them know is the reason for asking them to explain themselves is anxiety inducing. Yeah, that's exactly the point, comment, Kyla, about why. Thank you for catching that. All right, let's try. Here's what you should do. Here's what you should do. How could we, if we have something we think somebody should do, right? Like this is, as a mentor, I've seen this. I want to tell you to do this thing. Here's what you should do. How can you present that in a way that's not going to be a judgment? As a question, have you considered? Good, I like that. Here's how I would approach the problem. Thank you, John Senna there. That's exactly, I think, right at the heart of it. Here's what I would do. So what that does is it takes an idea, instead of declaring it to be like the right way to go, it kind of sets it to the side and says, here's what I would do. Let's talk about it, right? It creates a conversation. Again, the point of feedback is to create a conversation that will lead to growth. That won't really work. So this is, it may feel, particularly if you're giving some, feedback on code, and as a programmer, it's pretty easy to draw this line and say, no, that's not going to work. Like, it's a binary, it's not going to work. But it doesn't create a conversation about what could work. So I like the stuff coming in here. In my experience, you might run into these problems. Good. There's a disadvantage I see to that approach. Now try to put yourself into it, right? Like how is this thing that's not working? Like, how is it affecting you? What is the emotion that you're experiencing? So, when you did that thing, I felt this, or I didn't get that. Like when you did that, I didn't understand it. I felt confused. I felt worried. I felt surprised, right? The way that the thing that does when you express, that feedback by replaying your reaction, again, it sets up a conversation. It does not put somebody on the defensive, and it becomes about you and not them, but the person you're talking to will still learn from it. Okay, here's another one of my favorites. You need to improve your communication skills. This is like the placeholder feedback for everything. Like, you don't like what's going on, like blame it on communication skills. Well, how the hell do I get better at communicating? Right? Like, there's communication degrees. Sure, you could go, I don't know, should I go take a communications class at my local community college, right? It's not helpful. So good, turning it around. I'm having a hard time understanding what you're trying to say. It's about my understanding, right? I'm having a hard time understand, and getting even more specific. Here is where you lost me. Like, I understood this, and then you lost me here, right? That puts the feedback right in a spot that is actionable. So you can pick right back up and fix the communication, right? Like, communication isn't a skill to go work on, right? It's a relationship between two people that takes questioning and open mind to make happen between the two of you. All right, so let's get a little bit more specific here. You're slow to complete your work. You've got somebody who's always missing deadlines. You're slow to complete your work. How could you turn that around and replay it as a reaction? Discussion for the manager to have, not me. All right, good. So some good questions here. What are your blockers? Is there a bottleneck I can help you with? Somebody find me a reaction. Like, how does this affecting you? So when you miss a deadline or when you don't check in your code on time, what emotions do you experience? Like, I was worried about shipping the feature on time. Good, connecting it to your worry. Oh, let me stop real quick here with John Sawyers. He said, I feel like you're scrambling. Now, it's possible to start a sentence with I feel and still create a judgment. And that's exactly what you do when you say, I feel that you, right? Now it is no longer about your reaction, but it's a judgment. I feel like you're scrambling is still a judgment. And it's not particularly harsh judgment by any means, but still you putting your perception on top of their experience. And so how do you feel, John? Like you think that person's scrambling, but how does that make you feel? Right? What are you worried about or surprised about? Yeah, concerned that we're not going to hit our commitments. Linda, you just called me out on nonviolent communication. Yes, much of this is from nonviolent communication. I love Rosenthal, and 100%. That's a great resource, a great way to think about feedback. Because all of his work really is about preventing that defensive response and keeping a conversation going. All right. One more there. You spin your wheels too long before asking for help. And then we'll go on. You spin your wheels for too long for asking for help. Great. There's another, here's what's worked for me. When I get stuck on something, I find it helpful to talk it through. If somebody on your team is not asking for help, it's probably got more to do with the team environment than that individual, right? So how easy is it to ask for help? What are the ramifications of doing so? Good. This is a big one. I love this, and this can really magnify your effectiveness as a mentor if you can present information. It makes you a great teammate too in terms of reviewing other people's code pull requests. And there is an article linked there as well called The Feedback Fallacy. It's an HBR article. It's also where I stole a lot of this material from. I actually had a version of this course that was completely different about feedback. And then I read that article and it sent me on this journey that changed everything I ever thought about giving feedback. So I encourage you to go deeper and to practice there as well. It takes practice. It takes developing your own vocabulary around your reactions. I have another book recommendation in there. Thank you for sharing that. Crucial Conversations is another great book in this concept of how to have difficult conversations and turn them into really good feedback. All right, number 7, also about is also about feedback. And this is successful mentors look for outcomes. It can be tempting as a mentor to do 2 things. The first is to think about the apprentice as an empty cup. Like the learner is this empty vessel that we're meant to fill with all our great knowledge and wisdom about how to do the thing we're mentoring them to do. But again, thinking back to the brain grows grows most where it's already the strongest, and none of the people we're working with come in knowing nothing, right? You have to build in proximity to what they already know. And then we have a tendency to define excellence narrowly. Like, I know what great looks like. I know what great code looks like, and it looks like me. It looks like what I would write. And we have this picture for how something should be done. And we think we present it as the right way. No one has ever been corrected into greatness. And when we hold somebody up to sort of one picture of what excellence looks like, we just miss. The best we can hope for is to build some poor imitation of ourself when we look at mentoring that way. And we want to go beyond that. We want to go further than that. So what can you do here? It's to look for outcomes, look for excellent outcomes and identify them, point them out, and then help the learner to figure out their own process that got them there. I'll give you another example with my daughter. We've been learning to hit a baseball, wiffle ball. She's been loving it. And she started out like most kids will do. She'll swing the bat and swing her whole body around, right? Which you've sort of got no hope of making contact if you're spinning your whole body around. So I was trying to get her to keep her feet planted. And I said that I want you, keep your feet planted. She wasn't doing it. She wasn't getting it. But then, I kept pitching her the ball, and then she just like all of a sudden made this great contact and hit the ball right back at me. And so I did this. It was a great outcome. I have no idea how she did it. I said, "Wow, how did you do that?" And she said, "I screwed my feet in, Daddy." I'm like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, I screwed my feet in." Okay, so I try to raise my daughter with a knowledge of power tools, right? So she's got her own toy drills and screws and stuff, and she bent over and said, "Yeah," like she was holding a drill in her hand or a screw gun, and I screwed my feet into the ground, Dad. I'm like, "That's incredible, right? That's perfect. Like, I didn't come up with that. Like, that came out of her own experience and her own knowledge." So what do I do as her mentor? Now every time before she swings the bat, we both lean over and screw our feet into the ground, right? Like reinforcing the pattern that she developed, right? It's a version of excellence that I didn't come up with, but was able to see that great outcome and then reinforce it and build it for her, right? So that's the kind of thing we want to do in mentoring, is find those great outcomes. Like, got something to work in a way that we would not have done. Here's where that great question, how did you do that, right? How did you figure that out? That thing is that thing, I really like that outcome. How did you do that? And helping them understand and recreate and refine what they've done. Some questions you can use, like, did you see what you did there? Or how did you do that? What were you thinking? All right. Let's go to number 8. Number 8 is a big concept here. I'm just going to scratch the surface of it, but it's another place where there's a lot of depth that you can go to. And I want to start here by asking you, what is your dominant or preferred learning style? Just give me your answer in the chat and in your workbook there. What's your preferred learning style? The pragmatic, good. Visual, spatial, reading, observing, practice. So the way to really win in mentoring is figure out your learner's preferred teaching or preferred learning style, and then tailor all of your work to that learning style, and they'll have better outcomes, right? That's actually completely wrong. That's what I thought too. I thought that was the thing to do as a mentor, is to figure out what a learning style is and funnel everything through that learning style to the apprentice. There's actually been studies done at educational institutions that did this. Like, they assessed learning styles, they tailored the curriculum, and time and time again in these studies, the students got no better outcomes when the curriculum had been tailored to their so-called learning style. So I actually want to drop the term learning style altogether. It's not actually useful for us, because all it does is sort of put somebody in a box, if you will, right? And it actually is a mechanism for bias as well. We see in people, oh, they're just not that kind of learner. Or they're just not a logical thinker. They're just not good with words, and it shuts down our opinion of that person and how they could grow in that area. Some of the best work here is on intelligences. So I want to introduce this intelligence model to you. Here's where you can go much deeper. This is created by a sociologist named Howard Gardner, and I want to run through his intelligences with you. He was just frustrated with the IQ test that tests just kind of one dimension of intelligence, and through both brain science research and psychological research came up with these different intelligences. So let me just run through them real quickly. Verbal linguistic is anything having to do with words, speaking, talking, writing, reading, listening, everything with words. Logical mathematical is maybe what we're most familiar with as programmers. It's solving problems, math, and everything fits into there. Intrapersonal is understanding one's own thoughts, motivations, and feelings, sort of understanding yourself. Anybody got just a quick audio check? I think somebody lost audio. Are we good otherwise? Okay. All right, hopefully get you back, Matt. Interpersonal is understanding other people, understanding other people's thoughts, motivations. Musical is understanding tone, rhythm, timbre, the ability to play songs by ear. Visual spatial is thinking in 3 dimensions, the intelligence it takes to navigate a map. You have to put yourself in the map and imagine yourself in there, how things relate to each other. Bodily kinesthetic is that sort of hands-on type of intelligence, being able to coordinate the mind and the body. Think about like gymnasts or ninja warriors having great bodily kinesthetic intelligence, but it also just anytime you have your actual hands on the thing you're working on, even in programming, right? Naturalistic is the classification and categorization of the world. Think about hierarchies. Think about the way that species are categorized into genus, family, species. That's sort of organizational taxonomy, being able to classify things. It's also what you use to compare 2 things, to the difference between this car or that car that you're going to buy. And then existential is asking the big questions of why, why does JavaScript exist? Right? One of the core existential questions if you're going to code in JavaScript, I think. But the big questions, why do we exist? Why do we live? Thinking on that level. And one of the things about Sarah, the person I talked about in the opening, was that she had a really high existential intelligence. And she was frustrating me all the time because she would never just do what I asked. She would always ask me why. Why am I doing this exercise? Right. So I had to change how I was mentoring because she wanted to enter nearly every concept from that existential doorway. And that's how I like to think about these when we're talking about working with somebody to understand a concept, is that people do have some natural strengths in their intelligences, and we want to individualize the entry point to those strengths. Because again, the brain grows where it's the strongest. And so that's the first part of this secret, is to individualize the entry point. But once we're there, once we introduce a concept, then we want to pluralize our instruction. So here is the big words for this one: individualize, then pluralize concepts. Sorry about the lag on the typing there. Individual, then pluralize. So use somebody's natural strength to sort of introduce a concept, but then once you're there, explore the space with other intelligences, because these intelligences are not static in any one. They can be developed with practice, right? And this is where we get into trouble with bias too. People say, oh, I'm just not a musical person. Like, I can't carry a tune in a bucket, whatever it is. Well, musicality is something you can practice, right? It's nothing more than a set of skills that can be learned. And the same is true with any of these. I'm more on the introverted side, and it can be easy to say, like, oh, I'm just not a people person, right? But no, I learned how to talk to people. Like, I used a kind of logical, mathematical way. Like, if I'm going to have a tough conversation with somebody, I write down steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I want to make, right? But they're skills that I learned, and any of these skills can be learned if we take a growth mindset. So as you're mentoring, then you're not just teaching a concept, but you're help developing all of the intelligences of the learner. So I want to take a minute and just kind of explore this space with you. I want you to think of some ideas. So this can be a programming concept. If you want to think about some other area, you can. But what ideas do you have for introducing some kind of programming concept using one of these intelligences? So I want you to think about that. You don't have to get to all of them, but what might kind of stretch beyond the normal logical mathematical approach to teaching people programming concepts. Metaphors. So good metaphors actually kind of fall into that musical intelligence, believe it or not. Metaphors are mnemonics. When I think about musical intelligence too, I think about Jim Wyrick up on the RubyConf stage with his ukulele. If you haven't ever caught that video, it's a great classic to go back and look, right? Bringing us programming concepts through a song. But anytime but mnemonic, the solid principles, right? That's a mnemonic. It's a way to remember. It's using the musical intelligence. In intrapersonal, when we ask people like to blog or to journal about a topic, we're asking them to look inside and to talk about how they are reacting to something. Pair programming is using the interpersonal intelligence. Whiteboarding is a great, visual spatial. So drawing class diagrams, block diagrams. That one comes, I think, pretty naturally to us. Make a number of comparisons to vehicles and things like that. Yeah, metaphor. So comparisons, using that naturalistic intelligence, like API or language documentation is actually a great naturalistic way to approach learning, right? They've, if you go to like the Rails doc or Ruby docs, you see, you've got the system broken out into taxonomies, into parts, and you can kind of navigate the tree and learn about a library or an API that way. Thanks for the picture here. Oh, nice. So it's a explaining the triple equals in JavaScript. Yes, I still get caught up by this. I had to look it up like 2 days ago. I had to look it up again. I'm like, what? Because my linter was giving me. Oh, you think of people having their own API to learn and work with. That's cool. Oh, the bubble sort folk dance. Yeah, another great musical way to explain a programming concept. I love that. Yeah, so typey, like there is a physicality to programming that can actually get in people's way. And so doing some typing exercises can help get that under somebody's fingers. Fantastic. All right. Number 9, I'm going to breeze through pretty quickly because I want to get to 10. Let me give it to you real quickly. So successful mentors define clear learning outcomes. This is, I've given you a couple examples here. If if I were to ask you what is important to know to be successful on your team, a lot of times you might, the response I hear is somebody needs to understand this thing. This is a way of taking that verb understand and being a lot more specific. So I've given you a stack of verbs here, all of which indicate sort of different levels of learning, but a way to set up successful learning outcomes for an apprentice. And for our formal apprenticeships at One World Coders, I have a whole spreadsheet full of these, the specific outcomes that we're looking for, and a verb, an object, and a context. So I'm going to buzz by that because I want to get to this final one in our last 5 minutes here. So number 10, successful mentors protect, separate, and then leave. Protect, separate, and leave. This is a way of kind of talking about the overall relationship and how it evolves over time. And I'm going to use this image and concept from Japan called shuhari. So it kind of categorizes, sort of lays out the apprenticeship relationship over time. So in the innermost circle is shu. This is the protect phase. The character, it literally means here to abide by or to defend. In this first phase of the relationship, you have this sort of protective shell, this image of a mother hen sitting on the eggs and protecting them. You're giving a safe environment for somebody to learn, to be able to fail, but not to become a failure. I love Karate Kid, and if you've ever seen these movies, the most sort of classic thing you see is Miyagi teaching Daniel to paint the fence, doing all these repetitive actions before he's ever actually allowed to fight. And then all of a sudden these become the foundation of his whole defensive karate. And that's the kind of environment that we initially create. A safe to fail, protected environment where the apprentice does what is asked of the mentor, and the mentor sort of shelters or protects them. The second phase, the second ring here is ha. It means to detach or to digress. I want you to think about a baby bird hatching out of the egg, starting to become its own creature. Um, uh, this is where the apprentice starts to push back on the ideas that they're hearing, start to question, start to the literal meaning of ha here is to break. And then the final phase is re. It means to leave or to separate. Our hope is that the learner or apprentice we're working with does not become a poor imitation of ourselves, but actually becomes more than we are able to do more, to stand on our shoulders, so to speak. For Star Wars fans, there's a great moment in The Last Jedi when Luke is about to set fire to the Jedi tree, and Yoda appears to him, and they're talking about Ben and what went wrong, and Yoda says this thing that just resonates so much with me. He says, "We are what they grow beyond." And that's our hope for mentoring, is that we become the thing that our apprentices grow beyond. And to do that, they actually have to leave. That might be to a different team inside of your company. It might be to a different company, but the apprentice has to go make their own way. And so there comes a point in a relationship where that actually happens. And what's happened for me over the years is that I've had many apprentices leave, go on, do incredible things, and then we end up working together as peers on something different, right? Like time is long, but there has to be the separation phase for somebody to really be able to stand on your shoulders and learn what you have learned, go beyond what you have worked with them on. The other image I give you here is a tree here, and it's a bonsai tree. This mentoring journey has really got me obsessed with bonsai, so I'm in all these Facebook groups trying to learn how to do this. But if you think about the roots of what somebody knows, being in that shoe phase, like you're planting and forming those roots. But as the tree grows, it's going to grow its own way, become its own thing. There's a great clip in Karate Kid 3, if you ever get that far, where Miyagi talks about Daniel as a bonsai tree growing his own way. But you'll see too that these are represented as concentric circles. So it's not that the apprentice departs one phase for another, but each phase contains the previous phase, right? That root, that essential of what you have created stays there as the apprentice grows. This mentorship really is about accompaniment. You're on a journey with somebody through their career, and helping them really find their way into their vocation. And that's some really meaningful work to me. So it is my 10 secrets. I've given you a little place to reflect here. And I would love to hear your answers to this. What connected with you the most? What do you want to remember? What are your major takeaways? What's important for you as you begin your mentoring journey? So I'm welcome you to stay on. I'm happy to stay on as long as anybody wants, and answer any questions. If you got to go, I appreciate your being here. Would love to see your answers to these in the Discord chat as we depart. If you're interested in me, I did put a little advertisement section on here. I do some of this training and coaching under the guise of the mentor. I do mentor training, help you set up mentoring programs, and also there's a link to One World Coders. And then my current gig, I work at Dade Systems as a director of engineering there. We're growing our team, need some Rails developers, so would love to talk to you about any of those opportunities if you're interested. But I'll hang on. I'll let people unmute if you want to ask questions. But thank you for joining me today, and peace to you all.
Hi, Doug. I have a question.
Yeah.
So
I have been working on being a mentor for probably 7 years now. So whatever job I'm in, I offer that and you can participate in it. And so this has been really helpful to me. So first of all, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I recently had an experience where I've noticed I don't do well with apprentices that feel like they already know everything and that come in and have an opinion. What I tend to do is like, all right, they're on their own. Like they have that confidence. I'm just going to give them homework to do and leave it to that. And so in the same experience, what's happened is I really like that graph you showed about how they work into an anxiety or an arousal flow. I've seen that. And what happens is that's where the relationship ends. And I feel like it leads them into that space where they have become a failure. What is a good mindset to approach someone who comes into an apprenticeship and says they know everything?
That's a great question. I actually don't have a good answer for you because when I recruit an apprentice or decide to take one on, it's exactly that humility and that willingness to learn that I look for. And if you're in a situation where somebody's dropping somebody on you saying, hey, mentor this person, and they didn't necessarily ask for it or want it, it's hard to get traction. Like you have to actually break them. Like they have to have some sort of crisis that's going to lead them to the place where they find that humility, and that's not always a pleasant or possible, right? So I actually, one of the things I do when I'm interviewing somebody to become an apprentice is that they'll write some code for me, and then I will just tear it apart. And watch how they react, right? It's a great indication to me of the willingness to learn, as if they take feedback, they make changes, they're excited to hear it, or if they start to get defensive. And it's just, there's enough people who are really hungry to learn that I don't necessarily want to spend time with somebody who doesn't.
Thank you.
So I have, I don't know if it's directly a question, but
no, go ahead, Irene.
Could you talk a little bit about formal mentoring programs versus just kind of informal mentoring? At my company, it's kind of, they're like, well, you're, in any of these senior levels, you're expected to mentor less experienced programmers, and we have no formal structure around that right now, and I find that problematic. I would like to find a way to work within that as I am pushing for them to implement something more formal.
Yeah, it's a great place to start, and where I start is with the learning outcomes. Like, what do we want people to know? And almost think about it. You can almost think about it as an onboarding program, right? Like, how do we bring people into the company or bring people from junior to senior developer, right? Progression inside of the company. And I think that starts with good learning outcomes. What do we want them to know? And the problem with sort of mentoring just inside of your daily work is that it doesn't always give you the opportunity to explore those things that are on that list, right? Like if you don't have the work coming from your product team or whatever that matches up with the thing they need to learn. And so what I would work for inside of a company is some time apart from direct project work that is focused on learning for the learner, right? And if we're gonna have a mentoring program, let's set aside some time for it where we can do some exercises that don't depend on the product stream giving us the right work, but that can, and it's a lot of times super helpful if somebody has never, they've been working in a Rails app for, several years, they've never actually started one from scratch, right? Like some of those fundamental things get missed when you join a mature team. And so having time set aside to build the, to build a toy project, to try to work towards learning something that they don't know, that the project's just not giving them the chance to. And that's part of the work I love doing with companies too, is helping them define those learning objectives, finding the mentors, and setting up those programs.
Thanks.
But thanks, Irene. Thanks for your engagement.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, sorry, I haven't found the hand raising button.
It's all right.
here.
Go ahead, Rich.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, anyway. I have one question. You also talked about it, like having mentors who are just a step ahead of you, which is good. And I, as a mentor, I had one or two students who were actually maybe a bit too close to my experience level, and sometimes I get nervous about explaining things and explaining concepts that I maybe not know. And yeah, how do you cope with not knowing things with people with similar experience levels?
Yeah, really great question, Rich. It's almost like the imposter syndrome for the mentor, right? Like,
I
who am
think so,
I
yeah.
to be qualified to teach this? Um, so, that's where that point of being a co-learner comes in. So, like, okay, if you hit something you don't know, right, let's learn it together. And what you can do is share your process for learning something, right? Like, where do you go? What resources do you use? How do you learn a thing? Because you don't have to be an expert. Don't set yourself up as the expert, but set yourself up as a co-learner. And then it's just, two people on the same path learning something together.
That's a great tip.
Takes a lot of the pressure out of it too.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
I had a question, actually. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what impact being a parent has had on your being a mentor.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's like a daily laboratory. And it's one of those things where they influence each other, right? I shared with you several examples about being a parent. But yeah, the same thing happens with kids. Like, I want to develop the character, not just shape the behavior. But goodness, as a parent, like, a lot of times you just need the kid to get to the damn car so we can go, right? So it's like mentoring 24/7. So I do really, I think there's a great interplay between the two. And I think the better I become as a parent, the better I become as a mentor, and vice versa.
So I have a 15-year-old. So I think he's older than your kids, and I'll say that I've definitely seen our relationship move more towards the principles that you're talking about for mentorship as he's become older and able to kind of participate in a relationship that is more like that.
Yeah. Shuhari is a great kind of model for raising kids too, right? Like, protect, detach, leave. Leaving doesn't look the same in all cultures, but yeah, it's also a great model as the kid becomes their own person. Awesome. Any other questions out there?
I have a question.
Yeah, Benjamin.
Hi, how's it going? Two sort of quick ones. One is, do you have any advice that is specific to technical mentorship? Because a lot of what you talked about today, I think, was very generally applicable to mentorship in many different areas of life. And then the second question is, do you have any specific advice for remote mentorship?
Great, both great questions. In terms of technical, what I have are a lot of methods for technical apprenticeship, right? They're built on these principles, but there are a lot of methods that we use. I can give you several examples. One is the kata. I don't know how many if you have done code katas or seen that method before, but essentially it's a solved problem that you have an apprentice repeat and eventually perform. So what's some of the more famous ones, like the bowling game kata, where you write a score for the bowling game. But it's a way to kind of constrain the problem to one thing you're trying to learn. So bowling game is great for like TDD fundamentals because if you set out to really like incremental test-driven design fundamentals, you set out to score a bowling game, most people just really will over design it. Like, you need frame objects and roles inside of frames. In this kata, it starts just with the simplest test, and keeps adding complexity, and that really elegant algorithm grows out of that doesn't have all that complexity. So it's right. So that So you show that or share a video of somebody doing that, and then have the learner repeat that, and then eventually perform it. Right. That's one of the methods that I use for technical mentorship. Remote. Remote. I used to say like it's not possible. You got to be in person. And then I started a company in Africa where I was going to go visit once in a while, and then COVID, and well, here we are. Got a whole team there who I've never met in person. So remote apprenticeships, I think, anchor on a few things. You need a set time that you meet every day. And for our apprentices and mentors, that's a 1 hour when whatever their overlap is that they meet every day. That gives you a consistent time to check in, and then an easy asynchronous channel for questions. So we use Slack, and we actually have an even broader channel with all our mentors and all our apprentices together where questions can go, so that there can be more real-time interactions even if a particular mentor is busy. So those are two things we found that really have been effective.
Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Benjamin.
I noticed that your, I guess you could call it a company name or project name is the Mentor. So I was curious what it's like to be a mentor to mentors.
That's so meta, right? I started this effort at 8th Light because we wanted more people to mentor, and it felt like this high bar, So it's really a matter of observing what our best mentors were doing and categorizing and finding some academic research and some methods to kind of really build scaffolding, right? We had expert mentors, but like I've been working on building all the scaffolding to get there. And it's, what I care about is creating opportunity for people. And, we had 75 people here today. I hope that results in a couple of hundred people getting opportunities. That's my hope. Any other questions? I will certainly be around this week. Feel free to hop back into that Discord channel if you want to ask more questions. I'd prefer you ask questions there for the benefit of everybody. And I'll maybe see you around in a live session or in a channel.
Thanks, Doug. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.